Coming up on Network Africa, Kenya says it will engage Russia over its coronavirus vaccine. Police used tear gas and water cannons to disperse thousands of Malians who are renewing their calls for President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta to resign. Plus, the United Nations marks International Youth Day. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. Thousands of people are renewing their calls for President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta to step down despite international mediation efforts to resolve a political crisis in Mali. However, police have used tear gas and water cannons to disperse the protests led by an opposition coalition called M5 RFP that have raged since June, caused by contested local elections and perceived government corruption and incompetence.
If President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta had thought concessions and international mediation would quell the unrest in Mali, so far he's been mistaken. In the capital's heaving Independence Square, they chanted, "Keïta, step down and listen to your people," as influential Imam Mohamed Dicko, seen as a galvanizing force behind the demonstrations, called for a Malian solution.
They want to break us, barricade the road so they can say that we want to burn the country, that we are thugs, thieves or bandits. This is to distract us, and we shall never accept that. We will fight it dignity, respecting one another completely. There will be a way out of the crisis, God willing.
Protests led by opposition group M5 RFP have raged since June, caused by contested local elections and perceived government corruption and incompetence. It worsened in July after police shot dead at least 11 demonstrators. Regional leaders are concerned that the unrest could destabilize efforts to tackle Islamist extremism that has rendered large parts of the country's north and center ungovernable. A mediating delegation of those leaders has made recommendations, and the government has also offered concessions. On Sunday, Prime Minister Boubou Cissé called for M5 RFP to accept dialogue and that they were ready to take into account other concerns. So far, such offers have failed to stem the tide of disaffection.
Our coronavirus coverage begins in Kenya, where the Health Ministry says it will engage Russia over its COVID-19 vaccine. Health Chief Administrative Secretary Mercy Manganyi says Kenya will plug in and work with Russia to ensure that the vaccine is safe before use, and the Kenyan government will follow protocols through its foreign ministry. This comes after Russia became the first country in the world to officially register its vaccine. But experts have raised concerns about the speed of Russia's work, suggesting that researchers might be cutting corners. Kenya has so far confirmed 27,425 coronavirus cases. While South Africa's new coronavirus infections appear to be stabilizing, the number of new infections in the country has fallen dramatically, the lowest since June. Now, the country's coronavirus recovery rate has increased to 75%, its highest to date, and well above the global average of 62%. New COVID-19 cases have declined from a peak of around 15,000 daily infections to just over 2,500 in the past 24 hours. There's also been a decrease in coronavirus-related fatalities. The province of KwaZulu-Natal has become the latest hotspot and now has the second highest number of cases in the country. Close to 200 students and staff have also tested positive for COVID-19 in different universities in the province. And some good news here in Nigeria. The Foreign Affairs Minister, Geoffrey Onyeama, has recovered from COVID-19 weeks after testing positive for the virus. The minister announced this on his Twitter handle, saying he spent 3 weeks in isolation. The tweet reads, "By the very special grace of God, my latest COVID-19 test result came back negative after 3 weeks isolation. I am eternally grateful to my family, the CNC and VP, the medical team, relations, friends, colleagues, religious leaders, and numerous well-wishers who, through their care, prayers, fasting, messages of support and encouragement, never let me walk alone." The minister has already resumed duties and was welcomed to a round of cheers by staff of his ministry. So far, over 33,600 people have recovered from the virus in Nigeria. Well, a young Tunisian athlete and member of the national team is donating her time at an emergency center to help combat the coronavirus pandemic. Dora Mafouti, who is a National Olympics athlete and pole vaulting record breaker, has been splitting her time between practice and volunteering to help her country.
Dora Mafouti is a 29-year-old who specializes in pole vault and dreams of a career in both sports and medicine. As the novel coronavirus pandemic swept through her country, Mafouti shifted much of her attention to volunteering at a medical center designed to take samples from suspected COVID-19 cases.
It has become normal to take these types of samples in light of this pandemic. He is someone who entered Tunisia 7 days ago and exhibited symptoms of the coronavirus. He's at home now and has called us, so we're going to meet him. We must take all precautions to protect ourselves.
Gearing up in an ambulance van, Mafouti puts on her protective mask, gloves, and suit each day before heading out to people's homes to take their samples. She is one of 8 volunteer medics working at Tunis Urgent Medical Center who are trying to ease the burden on the pandemic's front line after a call for assistance by the Ministry of Health.
At first, my colleagues and I were watching how things work here, and then after a while, we started doing the same interventions that doctors who work here do.
Although seemingly different, Mafouti says that medicine and sports are complementary, adding that sports helped her throughout her medical career by teaching her patience and focus. Tunisia has largely controlled a first wave of the coronavirus, but a recent government collapse may complicate efforts to handle any new surge in coronavirus cases.
Today is International Youth Day, an awareness day designated by the United Nations to draw attention to a given set of cultural and legal issues surrounding youths. This year's theme is Youth Engagement for Global Action, seeking to highlight the ways in which the engagement of young people at the local, national, and global levels is enriching national and multilateral institutions and processes. Here in Africa, one of the biggest assets the continent has is its young population. However, many of them are out of school, unemployed, and don't have the opportunity to be at the helm of affairs or make decisions in their state. Also, with the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, the role of young people has become ever so important because this demographic play a key role in the management of this outbreak and the recovery following the outbreak. The World Health Organization has also made this clear in a speech to mark the International Youth Day 2020. WHO Chief Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus once again appealed to young people to do their part to stop coronavirus from spreading. Meanwhile, the International Labour Organization is warning that many young people who have lost their jobs or schooling during this pandemic risk carrying scarring effects throughout their working lives unless governments provide immediate support. In a report, the ILO is asking governments to help reintegrate jobless youths into labour markets or provide educational training and unemployment insurance benefits. According to Sangyo Lee, the director of ILO's Employment Policy Department, young women and youths in low-income countries are among the hardest hit.
Young people who may not have a good chance to have the access to job opportunity when they are very young or the very entry stage of the labor market, the consequences will continue. It's just not the one-shot game, continue with the rest of their working life. So that's why we are calling scarring effects. And overall, we think there are really genuine high risk of these actually scarring effects for many, many young people this time. And so that's why we are calling for very systematic, actually massive policy intervention.
Well, Meryl Omondi, a one champion in East Africa, joins us now to discuss more on Youth Day. Thank you, Meryl, for speaking to us on the program. Tell us, what is the significance of this day on our continent, Africa?
Thank you very much for having me, and we're very glad to have this opportunity from East Africa to share some of our thoughts. When it comes to the engagement of young people, we strongly believe it is actually our time to mobilize, engage, and continue to lead change on the continent. The main thing that we actually believe as our role is to make sure that we are actively creating those opportunities through entrepreneurship and facilitating political engagement.
And under this current COVID-19 pandemic, no doubt many young ones have been badly affected. You know, some have lost their jobs, some have lost their education. Their education has also been set back because of the lockdown restrictions. A whole lot has been impacted. What should African governments, do to support young people even at this time?
There is no doubt that the pandemic has actually quite adversely affected young people in Africa when it comes to them being even the most vulnerable groups in rural areas in terms of lacking access to infrastructure and jobs. And there's no denying that the government actually plays a very important role in making sure that young people have access to those opportunities. And that requires systemic transformation across the continent when it comes to providing youth with access to procurement opportunities in government, when it comes to facilitating engagement with the private sector, and also enabling young people to actively be involved in politics and policy implementation. And this is primarily making sure that young people are able to actively engage in local public participation forums and having those specific outputs from those sessions being shared out and engaging young people in implementing them.
All right, Meryl, just finally, very quickly, as a young person today, how should we commemorate this day?
Well, it's just up to you to do one thing, and that means educate people. As a young person, we have so many resources in the 21st century, and it means that there's so much more that we can do. We have seen so many young people using social media as a tool to propel our activism at the grassroots level, and that is the one small thing young people can do to commemorate our position and affirm our role within growing the continent.
All right, then, Meryl Omondi, one champion in East Africa. Thank you for speaking to us, and happy Youth Day. Still ahead on the program. How would you like to shake your body like a belly dancer? You might learn a few steps from this Tunisian male belly dancer. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Authorities in Mauritius hope to finish pumping out the remaining oil from the ship that has caused a huge oil spill off the coast of the island. The aim is to transfer the fuel oil to land before the Japanese-owned MV Wakashio breaks up. Now, the ship, believed to have been carrying 4,000 tons of fuel oil, ran aground on a coral reef on the 25th of July. Mauritius is home to world-renowned coral reefs, and tourism is a crucial part of its economy. Aquatic life there is said to be dying as volunteers fish out dead eels from the oily waters. Efforts are also in top gear to clean up the environmental damage caused. Photographs from the port of Mahéborg shows volunteers, some wearing protective suits, preparing on the waterfront before setting off to clean up.
The ship is about to break, and we expected it could have broken up already last night, but it's still holding. But what we've learned is that it is still being held back by only the top metal plate that covers the surface of the ship, and that it is already fully cracked on the sides. And so there are still 600 tons of heavy fuel oil. Should the ship break, we would need to be prepared to absorb all this oil. So what's going to happen is that they are already right now over there where the ship is, installing buoys that surround the ship, so that should anything happen, they have some first level of protection there. So right now we are waiting for the VHF to go and find oil spills, and absorb them, pump them out of the water.
Well, Egypt's government has revamped Tahrir Square, doting the space occupied nearly a decade ago by throngs of anti-regime protesters with pharaonic monuments and private security guards. Critics say the project seems designed to tighten control and prevent future protests, while some archaeologists worry about the preservation of four sandstone sphinxes placed on a busy roundabout.
Once the cradle of Egypt's revolt, Cairo's Tahrir Square gets a makeover. Officials say they are improving the square in line with famous plazas in Europe, and its facelift, which includes new lighting on repainted buildings, has attracted some praise on social media for its grandiose effect. However, some critics say the project appears designed to tighten control on a symbolic public space and prevent future protests.
And this is what we did in Tahrir in 2011, where people not only sat together, but they conversed with each other, they had meetings, they had meaningful discussions, they also danced and sang and put placards. And that is something that is, as simple as it is deeply subversive as far as the Egyptian state is concerned. And I think what we're seeing now is a concerted, deliberate, and very self-conscious decision on the part of the state to prevent this from ever happening again.
Some archaeologists are concerned about the four ram-headed sandstone phoenix placed round in the center of the square. They were relocated from Karnak Temple Complex in Luxor, a UNESCO World Heritage Site 500 kilometers south of Cairo.
Currently, I think that there would be, and there is indeed, a debate about moving archaeological remains and decontextualizing them. And so one is the argument of decontextualization, and then the argument is for the artifact safety. And I have to say that granite is probably going to manage quite all right. However, the sphinxes are made out of sandstone and are a more sensitive stone, especially since the climate is changing and it rains more frequently in Cairo, and there is a lot of traffic and pollution. So I think that that is not best antiquities practice in terms of the sphinxes.
2 years later, a large crowd gathered in the square once again to push for and later celebrate the removal of Egypt's first freely elected president, Mohamed Morsi, by the then army chief, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Mr. al-Sisi's supporters see 2013 as a correction that allowed him to gain the presidency a year later and stabilize the country. But for his opponents, that year marked the start of a crackdown that ended the free-flowing atmosphere of the uprising and its aftermath.
When you hear belly dancing, one thinks of a female dancer, but it's completely the opposite in Tunisia. Let's go meet the country's male belly dancer who's swaying away from gender norms. Ashraf El Abed says he's challenging many who see it as a profession that should only be performed by women.
Wearing a long green outfit that flows around his body as he dances on stage, 27-year-old Ashraf El Abed says he's defying gender roles in his native Tunisia by choosing a career as a male belly dancer. Typically performed by women, belly dancing has a long history in Tunisian heritage and is defined by skilled movement of the torso and the traditional garments that are adorned with shiny ornaments. Although left to enjoy the art form at an early age, boys in Tunisia are discouraged from belly dancing as they get older.
I started dancing when I was very young. When I got older, about 7 or 8 years old, they told me I couldn't dance like that anymore. When I asked why, they said that men are not allowed to belly dance.
Having studied product design at university, El Abed said it became quickly clear to him that his true passion was dancing. His chosen path was not an easy one, as he repeatedly faced threats and slander from citizens that find his dancing unsuited to his gender.
It reached a point where some threatened to kill me. Someone sent me the photo of a gun with a message saying, "I am going to kill you." I went to the police to complain. The officer said, "Well, what can I do for you? You are dancing like a woman."
Despite repeated backlash from his community as well as estrangement from his parents, El Abed is determined to keep dancing, saying there is also a significant amount of support from those who love him.
And that's where we end the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke. Stay safe.